There is a man standing in a field somewhere right now. He is looking at something that most people would not look at twice. A 1971 Dodge Charger, or what used to be one. The roof has partially collapsed. The floor pans are gone, not rusted through, gone, replaced decades ago by the weeds growing up through where they used to be. 3 windows are missing. One door is held on by a single hinge and the particular stubbornness of oxidized metal that has fused itself into a shape it was never meant to hold. A family of animals has been living in the back seat for what appears to be several years. The man who owns the field has already told him it's not worth saving, too. Other collectors told him the same thing last month. He is not listening to any of them. He pulls out his phone and starts taking photographs. Something is happening in this moment that has almost nothing to do with the car. And if you want to understand the kind of person who sees a collapsed, field-rotted, structurally compromised wreck and feels not despair but the particular quiet excitement of someone who has just found exactly what they were looking for, you have to go somewhere. Most people never think to look. You have to go inside. There is a concept in psychology called differentiated identity. It describes the way certain people construct their sense of self, not through belonging to the mainstream, but through deliberate distance from it. These are not contrarians for the sake of being difficult. The distinction matters. A contrarian rejects the popular because it is popular. A person with differentiated identity rejects it because their internal compass points somewhere the crowd is not looking, and they have learned, and often through long experience, to trust that compass over the consensus. Watch, the person who restores the cars no one else will touch, and you will see this operating at every level. They are not interested in the 1969 Mustang that already has 700 restoration videos on YouTube. They are not drawn to the project that comes with a clear parts list and an active online community, and a forum thread where someone has already documented every problem they are about to encounter. That version of the project feels to them already solved. And a solved problem is not interesting. What interests them is the problem that has defeated everyone else. The car that the previous owner gave up on. The car that sat in a barn so long the barn itself began to decay around it. The car with the missing fin plate and the mystery history and the engine that a mechanic in 1987 described in a notebook as not worth the effort. That is the car they will spend the next 3 years of their life on. And the reason is not stubbornness, though it looks like stubbornness from the outside. The reason is that this car requires something the easy project does not. It requires them. Psychologists who study intrinsic motivation have identified what they call optimal challenge, the specific level of difficulty at which a task becomes fully absorbing. Too easy and the brain disengages. Too hard and it shuts down in overwhelm. But at the precise threshold where the challenge is almost beyond reach, something different happens. The brain enters a state researchers describe as flow. Time distorts. External noise falls away. The gap between the person and the problem dissolves. For most people, this threshold is relatively accessible. A moderately difficult puzzle. A challenging recipe. A project with clear steps and a visible finish line. For people who restore cars no one else would touch, the threshold is much higher. They have already solved the moderate problems. They solved them years ago, and somewhere in solving them they recalibrated. Each completed project raised the floor. The car that would have consumed them at 22 is now something they could finish in an afternoon. And so they need more. Not out of arrogance. Out of the specific hunger of a brain that has learned what full engagement feels like and will not accept anything less. The collapsed charger in the field is not a burden. It is the only problem complex enough to hold their complete attention. But there is another layer underneath the psychology of challenge, one that goes deeper than flow states and cognitive thresholds. These restorations are almost never really about the car. Spend time with the people who do this work. Not the polished hour-long YouTube documentaries, but the actual conversations. The ones that happen at the end of a long day with grease on their hands and something that isn't quite finished and isn't quite broken sitting between them. And a pattern emerges. Almost universally, the car they are most committed to is connected to something they lost. A father who died before they could finish a project together. A period of their own life that ended before it was supposed to. A version of themselves they left somewhere and are still quietly looking for. The psychological term for this is restorative nostalgia. Unlike the softer passive form of nostalgia that simply longs for the past, Restorative nostalgia is active. It does not want to remember. It wants to rebuild. It is the unconscious drive to reconstruct something that was taken, to go back and finish what was interrupted, to prove, to no one in particular and to everyone, that what was lost is not beyond recovery. When a man spends 4 years locating original parts for a car that everyone else condemned, he is not just restoring sheet metal and chrome, he is making an argument. The argument is that broken things can be brought back, that what has been left behind and forgotten and written off is not necessarily gone, that the judgment of the people who said it was not worth saving was wrong. That argument is rarely about the car. There is also something specific in the choice of difficulty that speaks to how these people relate to external validation. The easy restoration earns immediate respect. Post a before photo of a clean barn find with its original paint showing through the dust and the comments will arrive within hours. Admiration, excitement, offers to buy. The feedback loop is fast and generous. Most people find this rewarding. The person who chooses the collapsed, rusted, structurally compromised wreck is choosing a different relationship with recognition entirely. They will spend months, sometimes years, in a phase that looks to any outside observer like failure. The car will get worse before it gets better. There will be a period where it is in more pieces than it was when they found it. There will be a period where the people around them quietly stop asking how it is going, because the answer has been the same for 18 months. This person is not deterred by any of that, because they are not working for the audience. They are working for the moment when the thing runs again, and they know, with the particular certainty of someone who has been here before, that moment is coming. They do not need anyone else to believe that. They have their own evidence. They have their own history of moments where the thing that looked finished was not finished, where the patient work that looked pointless eventually paid out into something real and complete and undeniable. This is what psychologists call a high internal locus of control. The belief, not theoretical but operational, built into the body through experience, that outcomes are determined by effort and attention, not by what other people say is possible. The man in the field did not hear, "It's not worth saving" as information. He heard it as a measurement of other people's patience. There is a final dimension to this that almost never gets named. Directly, the cars that nobody else will touch are, almost always, the ones that were abandoned by someone else, not simply worn out, not simply old, abandoned, left in a field, pushed into a barn, sold for parts that never got pulled, given up on mid-project, driven until they stopped and then never addressed again. There is a particular quality of history in these cars that is different from the history in a car that was simply stored or preserved. These cars were given up on. Someone decided they were not worth the effort. The people who find them and bring them back have an intimate relationship with that experience. Talk to enough of them, and the same theme surfaces in different words. They know what it is to be underestimated. They know what it is to be written off. Some of them learned it early, in school systems that did not know what to do with the way they thought. Some of them learned it in careers where the value of their particular kind of attention was not legible to the people making decisions. Some of them learned it in relationships where their way of caring, slow, thorough, committed to things others had already discarded, was mistaken for stubbornness or emotional unavailability. They found the abandoned car, and they recognized something. Not sentimentally, not as metaphor, as fact. The car was written off by people who could not see what it still was. And they could see it, clearly, from the first moment they walked across that field. The restoration is the proof. 4 years of Saturdays, a rebuilt frame, fabricated floor pans, an engine that someone in 1987 wrote off in a notebook and that now turns over cleanly, in the cold morning air of a garage that smells like oil, and coffee and something that cannot be named but that everyone in this world knows. Immediately when they walk into it, the car runs. It was never gone. It was only waiting for the person patient enough, skilled enough, and quietly certain enough to come back for it. The people who restore the cars no one else will touch are not eccentric. They are not romantic in some impractical, head-in-the-clouds way. They are people who developed, through effort, through loss, through the specific education, of staying with difficult things long past the point when leaving. Would have been easier, yeah, particular kind of sight. They can see what something is. Underneath what it has become, they can hold the finished version of a thing in their mind, while their hands are dealing with the rusted, collapsed, structurally absent. reality in front of them, and they have enough evidence from their own history to trust that vision over every other voice. In the room, the question worth sitting with is not whether you could restore a car like that. The question is what in your own life you have already written off, what you walked away from because someone with more certainty than accuracy told you it was gone, that might still be sitting in a field somewhere, waiting not for a miracle, for someone who can see it clearly enough to begin,